The words cut like a blade through the penthouse air. "You stupid kid." Marcus Thorne, a billionaire who treated people like numbers on a balance sheet, had no idea he had just set fire to his own empire. Within hours, the foundation of his $7.5 billion fortune would begin to crack. Helen Carter, the maid who had learned how to blend into wallpaper, stood quietly nearby. Her daughter Clara sat in the corner, sketchbook in hand, a shadow in a room where powerful men signed contracts that reshaped industries. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. She wasn't supposed to matter. Then a single yellow crayon slipped from her fingers, rolling across the spotless white carpet. The tiny sound stopped the meeting cold. To Thorne, it wasn't a child's mistake. It was an intrusion. He leaned forward, eyes hard, voice dripping venom. "You stupid kid." The air froze. Every executive in the room shifted, uneasy, as if they knew something had shifted. What Thorne didn't know was that, at that moment, with one careless insult, he had set in motion the collapse of everything he had built. Clara didn't see any of that. All she felt was her mother's hand, gripping hers a little tighter, a silent shield against a storm that was about to consume a billionaire's world. In this world, children were meant to be invisible. Helen Carter believed in quiet work, the kind of work that erased itself, leaving behind only perfection. For 12 years she had been a ghost in the grandest homes and suites in the city. Marble floors gleamed like water after her touch. Beds were so precisely made they could cut paper at the corners. Her dignity was in her silence. Her daughter Clara was her heart. At 10 years old, Clara shared Helen's quiet spirit but carried her father's curious eyes. Pale corn silk hair framed her face, and she never went anywhere without her worn sketchbook. Today, because a burst pipe had closed her school, Helen had no choice but to bring Clara with her, not to an ordinary house, but to the Grand Majestic Hotel's penthouse, a place where clouds felt like neighbors. In the service elevator, Helen bent down. "Remember the rules, my love. Be a little mouse. Quiet, still, out of the way," Clara whispered back, clutching her sketchbook. The suite was vast. White carpet, glass walls overlooking the city, air scented faintly of leather and lemon. A single wooden chair in a corner became Clara's station. She opened her book and began sketching the city, not as towers but as sleeping giants. Helen moved through the room like a shadow, setting water, straightening files, making the world flawless for powerful men. The first to arrive was Marcus Thorne. He didn't enter. He conquered. Built of sharp angles and expensive cloth, his voice cut through the air as he barked into his phone. "Not tomorrow, now. I don't pay people to think. I pay them to execute." He ended the call, tossed his phone on the table, and gestured for water without looking at Helen. To him, she and Clara were furniture. The second man was different. General James Peterson, late 70s, silver-haired, with the calm authority of someone who had commanded armies. His suit was simple, his eyes sharp and kind. He greeted Helen with a respectful nod and even gave Clara a small grandfatherly wink. For the first time that morning, Clara smiled. The meeting began. Thorne's words were a storm of numbers and promises. He wanted $7.5 billion from the general to buy a robotics firm, the crowning deal of his career. Peterson listened, but his questions were about people, not profits. "What happens to the engineers after you take over?" he asked quietly. "Redundancies will be managed," Thorne snapped. "Dead weight has to be cut. That's business 101. Clara, half listening, drew them both. Thorne as a jagged mountain with thunder overhead, Peterson as a sturdy oak tree. Then her yellow crayon slipped from her lap, rolling across the carpet beneath the table. She hesitated, remembering her mother's warning. But it was her favorite crayon. She slipped from her chair, crawling quietly under the table, reaching. An eager executive bumped the table with his knee. A glass of ice water toppled, spilling across a stack of papers. It was minor, barely a stain, but Thorne's fury was instant. His voice cut mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed, and then he saw her. A flash of blonde hair beneath the table. Clara clutched her yellow crayon, trying to scurry back when his voice exploded. "You!" He was on his feet, pointing. The room froze. Helen rushed forward, apologies tumbling from her lips, but Thorne didn't hear. His gaze locked on the trembling girl. He leaned forward, his voice low, venomous. "What's wrong with you?" "You stupid kid," the words slammed into the silence. Clara's eyes filled, her small shoulders shaking as tears slid down her cheeks. Across the table, General Peterson slowly set down his pen. His expression was unreadable stone, but his gaze stayed on Clara, not Thorne. Something in the air shifted. Helen's heart pounded, but her steps were calm. She reached Clara, rested a steady hand on her shoulder. "Come, little mouse," she whispered, guiding her toward the door. She refused to meet Thorne's eyes. As they passed, Peterson's gaze met hers for a fleeting second. Not pity, but recognition. It gave her enough strength to walk out with her head high. The door shut behind them, leaving the suite in suffocating silence. Thorne sneered, mistaking the moment as trivial. "My apologies, General. Unprofessional. Won't happen again." He gestured back to his charts, desperate to reclaim momentum. As I was saying, our Q4 projections, but the room had changed. The deal was already dead, and Marcus Thorne, ruthless titan of Omnicorp, didn't yet realize that 2 careless words to a child had just cost him everything. The air was heavy. A moment ago, Marcus Thorne's voice had commanded the room. Now it only echoed in stillness. His junior executives shifted in their seats, afraid to breathe. General James Peterson sat motionless, reading a single sheet of the proposal, though he already knew every word. His movements were deliberate, reclaiming control not with volume, but with silence. Thorne faltered. "Your thoughts on the asset allocation?" He pressed, irritation creeping in. "The numbers are impressive," the general said quietly. Then he laid the page flat, perfectly aligned with the table's edge. "But paper is patient. It will hold any number you write on it." It was not a compliment. For the first time, Thorne felt something foreign, unease. He launched into his creed: efficiency, hunger, no tolerance for weakness. "That's how you build an empire," he declared. But Peterson's mind drifted back 50 years, to a muddy trench in a jungle. He saw Sergeant Michael Carter, quiet, steady, the kind of man who calmed panic with a smile. Once under fire, a terrified boy had dropped his rifle. Their commander, arrogant like Thorne, had screamed for the boy to abandon it. Carter had crawled into the line of fire, not for the weapon, but for the soldier. Calmly, he'd shielded the boy, whispering, "It's all right, son. Follow me." 2 weeks later, Carter died saving another. He had proved that true strength was not domination, but protection. Back in the present, Peterson's voice cut through the silence. "Weakness is a subjective term, Mr. Thorne." His gaze was steel. Meanwhile, in the service corridor, Helen knelt before Clara, wiping her daughter's tears with a handkerchief. "Look at me. You are not stupid. You are the smartest, kindest girl in the world." "But he was so angry, Mama. I made the water spill," Clara whispered. "No. A table was bumped. A glass tipped. That man's anger is a choice, not your fault. Don't you ever let someone like him make you feel small?" Helen pulled her close. Clara trembled, but her mother's words formed a shield around her. "Will you lose your job?" Clara asked. Helen paused, then forced conviction into her voice. "We'll be all right. You and me, we're a team. Always." Upstairs, Thorne tried to recover. "General, the world is a battlefield. You dominate or get dominated. My methods get results. Isn't that what matters?" Peterson stood. The meeting was over, not because time had run out, but because he had decided. "Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Thorne. It was very illuminating." Thorne rose quickly, his smile tight. "So, next steps. My legal team." The general ignored him. He walked to the alcove where Clara's chair still sat. Her sketchbook lay open, showing a jagged mountain with a thundercloud beside a sturdy oak. Peterson studied it, then looked at Thorne. "When I led men, they needed to know I had their backs, especially when they made mistakes. They needed to trust their leader, valued their humanity more than ambition. You build on fear, Mr. Thorne, but fear is brittle. Character is the only foundation that lasts." He closed the sketchbook, tucked it under his arm, and delivered the verdict like a gavel. "There will be no next steps. We will not move forward with this acquisition." And then he left, leaving silence like a tomb. Thorne stood frozen, drained of power. For the first time, his executives looked at him not with fear, but with clinical detachment. They were watching a king dethroned. Finally, he erupted, slamming his fist on the table. "Who does he think he is? Some dusty old fossil lecturing me about character? I built a $100 billion company. And you," he jabbed at his vice president. "Why didn't you say something?" Henderson's voice was quiet. "What could we say?" The general wasn't angry. He was Disappointed, Thorne spat. He made up his mind because of a maid and her brat. His mask of polished jargon had cracked and the ugliness poured out. He grabbed the phone. Get me hotel security. Fire her. Blacklist her. She'll never work in this city again. It was petty, vindictive, his last attempt to feel powerful. But Helen and Clara were already gone. Not through the back, but the front lobby. Helen's chin lifted in defiance. She wanted Clara to see the chandeliers, the marble, the polished wealth, not as a place of shame, but simply as a place they were leaving behind. Outside, the city air smelled of traffic and pretzels. On the bus ride home, Clara leaned against her mother, quiet but no longer crying. Helen looked out the window at the towers retreating in the distance. You know something, my love? She said softly. Empires built on fear always fall, but kindness lasts. On the bus ride home, Clara looked up wide-eyed. Your grandfather? My dad. He was a soldier, like that general in the meeting. Helen rarely spoke of him. Clara only had a faded photo, a young man with a kind smile and sad eyes. He wasn't the loudest or the strongest, Helen said softly. He was a hero because he was kind. He believed you judge a man's strength by how he treats someone who can do nothing for him. Clara thought of Marcus Thorne, loud, angry, unkind. Then of the general, quiet, steady, eyes full of warmth. He had winked at her. He had picked up her sketchbook. Like the general? She whispered. Helen smiled, genuine and bright. Exactly like the general. She didn't know if she still had a job or how she'd pay rent. Fear twisted inside her. Yet, with her daughter's head resting on her shoulder, she felt peace. No billionaire could take away her father's principles, her daughter's love, or her dignity. Across town, General Peterson's car pulled up at the National War Memorial. He walked slowly along the black granite wall, stopping at a familiar name. Michael J. Carter, the sergeant who had saved his life. Hello, Mike, he whispered. It's been a while. He hadn't gone to the meeting to be convinced. He had gone hoping to be wrong, but Thorne's cruelty confirmed every rumor. The name on Helen's uniform had been a coincidence, or perhaps fate. When Thorne had lashed out at Clara, Peterson hadn't just seen a child. He had seen Michael's courage reborn. He dialed his assistant. Eleanor, I need you to find someone. Helen Carter. Maid at the Grand Majestic, 10-year-old daughter, Clara, and I need her family history. Hours later, a file lay on his desk. Helen Carter, widow, single mother, spotless record. Her father, Sergeant Michael J. Carter, same platoon, same medals, same sacrifice. A legacy erased by a failed trust fund and bureaucratic neglect. She had grown up with almost nothing of what her father left behind. Peterson studied Helen's photo, then Michael's. The same eyes. The same quiet strength. The resemblance felt like destiny. He picked up the phone. Eleanor, get me legal, and find out who holds the lease for Thorne Tower. His voice was steel. This was no longer a deal, it was a campaign. That night, Helen's phone rang. The hotel manager's voice was curt. Mr. Thorne filed a complaint. He demands your immediate termination. Helen's stomach clenched, but she stood tall. I've worked here 12 years without a blemish. If you fire me over his tantrum, I'll go to the press. I'll tell them what really happened today. Silence. Managers were used to anger tears, never quiet dignity. Finally, he faltered. We'll review the matter. Helen hung up, trembling but proud. She turned to Clara, who was coloring a bright green tree under a yellow sun. Helen placed a hand on her shoulder. Everything will be all right, my love. And for the first time, she believed it. The next morning, Helen walked into the Grand Majestic in her pressed uniform, head high. Whispers followed her. She defied Marcus Thorne, she'll be fired. But she ignored them. She pushed her cart down the gleaming hallway, steady as her father once was in the mud of war. Far above, in an office lined with strategy maps, General James Peterson prepared his next move. Marcus Thorne thought he had humiliated a maid. Instead, he had awakened a ghost, and a promise 50 years in the making. Helen moved with practiced efficiency, changing linens, polishing mirrors, restoring rooms to order. Each swipe of her cloth grounded her. She was not a victim. She was a worker, and her work had dignity. By mid-morning, Mr. Davies appeared at the end of the hallway. Normally brisk, today his steps were hesitant. Helen, he said quietly, may we talk? She faced him calmly. Of course, Mr. Davies. He wrung his hands, uncharacteristically unsure. Thorne's office called again. They want you gone. My first instinct was to comply. He's powerful. But what you said yesterday about truth, it made me think. His voice grew firmer. This hotel was built by my grandfather on respect, for guests and for staff. We are not in the business of letting bullies push people around. Consider the matter closed. You are safe here. And Mr. Thorne? He's no longer welcome at the Grand Majestic. Helen swayed, relief almost overwhelming her. Thank you, she whispered, tears threatening. Davies gave a small, respectful nod and walked away. Across town, at the top of Thorne Tower, Marcus Thorne raged. His deal had collapsed, stock prices wavered, and now the Grand Majestic had terminated their account. To him, being defied by a maid and a hotel manager was unthinkable. His intercom buzzed. David Chun, Peterson Industries, on line 1. Thorne's fury flickered into hope. He straightened, smoothed his tie, and answered. Marcus Thorne speaking. Mr. Thorne, came the calm voice, your acquisition is permanently off the table. I'm calling regarding your lease at 101 Park Avenue. Peterson Industries owns the property. Your lease expires in 60 days. We will not renew it. The building will also be renamed, effective immediately. The silence was crushing. Thorne's voice cracked. You can't. Our legal position is ironclad, Chun replied. We also know of your attempt to ruin Helen Carter. I strongly advise against any further actions of that nature. General Peterson takes integrity very seriously. The line went dead. For the first time, Marcus Thorne felt genuine fear. The tower he thought was his monument was being stripped from him, letter by letter. That afternoon, a plain envelope arrived at Helen's apartment. Inside was Clara's sketchbook and a letter. Dear Miss Carter, your daughter sees the world with clarity and courage. I knew your father. He saved my life. His greatest hope was that you would grow up in a kinder world. I have failed to repay my debt to him until now. Enclosed is the beginning of that repayment. Never let anyone make you feel small again. Sincerely, James Peterson. Behind it lay a check, an amount so vast, Helen trembled as she held it. Enough for a home, college, a future secured. Clara peeked over. Mama, did the kind man bring back my sketchbook? Helen pulled her daughter close, tears falling freely. This was not charity. It was her father's legacy, finally reaching her after 50 years. Meanwhile, Thorne's downfall spread like fire. Tweets, blog posts, whispers, all retold the story of the billionaire, the maid, the child, and the general. Clara's drawing of the jagged mountain went viral, a simple crayon sketch that captured corporate arrogance. Headlines blared, The CEO and the crayon, how a child toppled a titan. Omnicorp stock plummeted. Clients fled. And Marcus Thorne, once untouchable, watched as his empire was dismantled, not with explosions, but with quiet acts of dignity, decency, and truth. In an emergency board meeting, the walls seemed to close in around Marcus Thorne. The board members who once feared him now stared with cold resolve. This is a disaster, Marcus, one of his strongest allies said. The brand is toxic. Thorne slammed his fist on the table. It's a temporary storm. Lies from the media. We ride it out. But no one believed him anymore. They feared not his power, but their own ruin. The vote is unanimous, the chairman declared. You are to step down as CEO effective immediately. Escorted from the building, Marcus passed through a silent lobby. No jeers, no applause, just blank stares. That silence was the loudest judgment. His legacy shrank to 3 bitter words whispered in corners. You stupid kid. A year later, the smell of fresh bread and butter filled the yellow crayon, Helen Carter's bakery. Sunlight poured through wide windows onto cases of pastries crafted like art. The shop was more than a business. It was a place of community and kindness. Helen, in her apron, moved with calm joy, greeting customers like old friends. She was no longer invisible. She was the creator of her own small world. Clara, now 11, sketched in her corner. Her drawings were sharper, more confident. She studied with an art tutor thanks to General Peterson's fund, yet she still drew with the honesty of a child who sees truth. Once a month, Peterson joined them for dinner. He didn't speak of medals. He told Clara stories of her grandfather, how Michael Carter gave rations to stray dogs, how he wrote letters full of hope. Through those stories, Helen found the father she lost, and Clara discovered the grandfather she never knew. One night, Clara studied her framed sketch of the jagged mountain and the oak tree. Do you ever think of him? She asked. Helen nodded. Sometimes. He had everything, but without kindness. He had nothing, Clara whispered. The oak tree is you. Mama and Uncle Jim and Grandpa, too. Outside, the old Thorn Tower, now Heritage Plaza, stood quietly against the skyline. No longer a monument to arrogance, but a reminder that true power isn't in the towers we build, but in the foundations of character we leave behind. Sometimes, all it takes is a single yellow crayon to change everything.